Hij zit er bij mij niet voor.
So, entrepreneurs, investors, it would be great if you could work in it and know what's cool at some point during the interview. The reason you're both here at this... There we go, it started. The reason you guys are both here...
Social network dialogue is off the table.
The reason you guys are both here, let's try this again, is because you both co-hosted a technology meetup at the White House this week, correct?
Not at the White House.
Not at the White House.
Across the street.
Across the street from the White House. Doesn't that count? So tell me a little bit about this meeting. You met with Obama for the 7th time in your life to encourage entrepreneurship.
It was something we co-hosted. The actual conversation was not. They told us the details not to talk about publicly, but it was a cool brainstorm about the future and technology. Sean had some great insights. If you want to
which we'll keep private.
Yeah, what are you guys allowed to say? Sorry about this stuff. What are you allowed to say? Is it...
Maybe we should move on to the next question.
Okay. You both have been serial entrepreneurs and serial investors and have crazy resumes, right? You were at SGN, now you're at Menlo, you were the president of Facebook, you're an Airtime founder, you're at Founders Fund, you're an investor in Spotify. I mean, first of all, do you guys just consider yourselves lucky? Like, you're worth $2.1 billion. How did you do this? This is such a crazy life. And then, what do you like better, being an entrepreneur or being an investor?
I'll take that one. So I actually don't really consider myself an investor. An investor or venture capitalist is almost like a slightly derogatory term in my book. So when people now introduce me primarily as a partner at Founders Fund, I have to correct them and say, no. I'm actually an entrepreneur. I just happen to have a fund. And I came to the realization that as an entrepreneur, constantly having to beg for money from investors wasn't terribly healthy. And so I would be better off being an entrepreneur who also has the benefit of a fund. So to answer your question, I like being an entrepreneur better, and I'm not an investor. Though I do make investments.
So what are you if you make investments but aren't an investor?
It's just semantics. Yeah. No, I mean I just don't consider myself a VC first and foremost. I consider myself an entrepreneur first and foremost. I think the world has enough VCs. It's a crowded. No offense, sure. But it's a crowded, increasingly crowded market, in particular early stage investing, and I think the world of VC would be just as well off with or without me. Whereas the world definitely needs entrepreneurs starting businesses. Right now, there's just too much capital chasing too few good and interesting businesses.
So Founders Fund just raised $625 million.
Yeah, I know.
So let's start ridiculous.
A bit hypocritical of me to sit here and say this and then go raise $625 million. Yeah.
Too much capital being thrown at too little real innovation.
Well, this is part of the reason why you should put your capital in Founders Fund. Because
sure
all of these other VCs are likely, we're likely to experience a die-off in venture capital funds, and particularly in the early stage. The funds that can't participate in mid-stage and late-stage deals, I think there's just way too many of these, angel funds and super angel funds running around, driving up the prices on a lot of the early stage deal flow. Which is not, it's great on the one hand because it does it means that more startups will get created because there's more money available. But where it hurts is that it prevents the aggregation of great talent around a really great idea. Because the talent gets diffused too thinly across way too many startups. Not to mention you're competing with big companies like Facebook and Spotify and so forth, for great talent. It's hard to get that critical mass of really great people to create a revolutionary, company on the scale of Facebook. Facebook worked, not just because Mark was brilliant and dropped out of Harvard or whatever the sort of folk story is. The company worked because there was a collection of incredibly talented people who all came together at just the right time around an idea that had enormous market potential, gigantic idea, huge vision. But you had Adam D'Angelo, who was the first CTO, who was one of the most brilliant technology founders I've worked with.
I agree with you.
You had Dustin Moskovitz, who was a fantastic engineer and just a great all-around thinker. We had Matt Kohler, who was sort of, you couldn't even give these people titles because what they did changed, from month to month. Matt is a great problem solver. He'd come over from LinkedIn and worked closely with Reid Hoffman, and he was instrumental in helping us scale the business. We had Aaron Siddig, who's the best designer I've ever worked with. Really an amazing guy. He worked with me at Napster and Plaxo and then took him to Facebook. There were many, many other key members of this early team, but I have yet to, well, with the possible exception of Airtime and Spotify, which both have incredible teams, I've yet to experience that kind of concentration of intellect and skill around one company, and that's what gets lost when there's too many too many early stage firms funding too many startups. The great technology founder doesn't end up working with the great business leader of their generation. They end up sort of each running their own separate and competing companies.
So, do you think there's a Series A crunch? Do you think that startups are having a harder time getting, you can answer this too, Series A funding because there's so many seed and early stage investments?
I think what Sean's talking about, and I agree with him, and we've actually talked about this before, is about that we're looking more for entrepreneurs who are going after really big ideas. It's kind of like the rule of that I talk about is that it takes as much time and energy and resources to run a local coffee shop as it does to run all of Starbucks. Which one would you rather be as an entrepreneur? And we all have the same number of hours every day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And which problems do you want to go after? At the same time, we're living in a really historic transitional period in time. You look at 2011 and all of the history that's been made, all of the changes that have happened, and they're accelerating. And a lot of them have been facilitated by social networking software, mobile, things that Sean has had a deep part in helping to invent. And now you can build multi-billion-dollar companies that can change the world in a compacted period of time. You have companies that in 3 years, in 2 years, could become multi-billion-dollar companies. The Dropboxes, the Facebooks, the Zyngas, the list goes on. So this is we said to each other, the world is a startup. The world is a startup. Right now, we're in a transitional period of time. And, rather than a bunch of really small ideas diluted by a bunch of teams, as John said, spread thinly, we need to concentrate the greatest talents around the biggest ideas and help change our planet and help change our world in the 21st century. And the other thing we talk about is that, it's the youth that are there. It's, Zuck was 18 and helped by Sean, who was, how old were you then? 21, 22?
I think Zuck was actually closer to 21 and I was like 24.
Okay, yeah, but when he was in Harvard and helped start it. It's a revolution of the young. And I think the thing that, the reason why we go to places like Washington and we talk about these things is that our generation is ready to lead, not just in business, but in many areas. And we don't want to accept the institutions that we've inherited. We'd like to disrupt them. We'd like to change them. There are things that have been built for the 20th century don't compute for us, right? And so we'd like to change them, and we kind of, call bullshit on the notion that the leaders of our world need to be the old. It needs to be the youth, that are starting in the revolution of startups, but spreading to many other areas of our world.
Okay, but you invested in Shaker, which is a second life for Facebook. Do you think that this is a big idea? Do you think it's a multi-billion-dollar company? Do you think it's a Dropbox?
At the core of Shaker's concept is a pretty deep insight, which is, the reason Sean's doing Airtime, the reason that I did Shaker, the reason that we even looked at, some of these other companies in this space, which is that people are looking for more serendipity in their lives. They're bored. They'd like to meet more interesting people. One of the issues with Facebook today is that you've pretty much met all the people in your real life. You're connected, even if you just went to kindergarten with them. We've all kind of reached our maximal throughput. We're looking for a little more randomness in our lives. Things like Shaker, like Airtime, are helping to bring that kind of diversity and that element of luck, of meeting completely new people in the world. It's a giant world, and it can be made smaller by things like Shaker and Airtime.
So what would you definitely not invest in? You guys talk about big ideas and innovation, and I know that Founders Fund is kind of famous in the Valley for stuff like Palantir and Genentech.
Well, since I'm not an investor at all. The investor cliche is basically that we invest in teams. In my case, I'm typically looking for in a really enormous market. So an idea that has the potential, whether it's in an existing market or a completely new market, a category-defining company, but something really, really huge. It's hard for me to get out of bed in the morning and work on a lot of small problems because I've had the privilege over my life to work on some pretty big ones. So I got to get excited about the magnitude of the problem that the company is going after. Ultimately, I have to believe that the team can execute this vision. And meaning they need to be a complete team. There needs to be a great technology leader and a great core engineer. If it's a company that's on the consumer side, you're going to want to have fantastic design capability. These capabilities can all live in multiple people, or in some cases, different capabilities live in the same person in a startup, and then over time, you obviously, as you build your organization, there's some specialization occurs. It has to. But so many companies come to us and they don't have this complete team. They're missing certain key ingredients, and they think they're going to go and hire those ingredients. Like, for instance, companies that don't have a great engineering leader in the founding team, someone who could not just write code, but also hire engineers rapidly and manage them effectively. Those companies don't tend to find a VP of engineering until much later when they've become successful. So they have a very difficult and awkward period in the meantime where they don't have that carrot available to them to say, come and found a company with me. And the level of equity that you're able to give someone as a founder is so different from the level of equity you can give someone later on. So if you don't get all of those key things figured out from the outset, I'm not going to be one of these activist VCs that comes in and fires the team, fires the CEO, redirects the company. I'm very collaborative. I'm super operationally involved in the companies that I invest in, which is why I don't really think of myself much as an investor, because I always take an operating role. But I don't get in and reconfigure management because I think it almost inevitably leads to a bad outcome. So a lot of if you have a startup company and you're pitching it and you're getting a lot of no's, it may have nothing to do with your idea. It probably has more to do with the team that they're seeing. The group of people that you've assembled to build the idea, and perhaps a belief that you don't have a complete team in place to execute it.
So you're both investors in Gowalla, or were investors in Gowalla, which just sold to Facebook. And Michael Arrington wrote an article about how some investors weren't happy with that deal. Do you think that Gowalla had the team problem? And then how do you feel after that exit? How do you feel about the quality?
Both happy.
I mean, I think it's a great outcome for Josh.
Absolutely.
I mean, he was in a difficult and very competitive space against Foursquare and Facebook, and I think his approach to the market. I'll just be brutally honest about it here. I'm happy with the outcome. I have a great relationship with the company and with Josh. I think his approach to the market was lacking in innovation. I mean, the product that they launched with a couple years ago was just too similar to Foursquare. And Foursquare already had a market lead. There were a lot of interesting things I think they could have done to differentiate themselves from Foursquare, which would have been inherently viral and could have fueled the growth of the network. And ultimately, the entrepreneur has to make that call. So I came to the table with a lot of very specific product feedback, and the company was really dead set, very very tenaciously attached to their current plan, and they didn't want to consider any alternatives. It was my view, and this was a few years ago, that they'd already lost the market to Foursquare at that point, and most of the minor iteration and basically superficial changes to the product over the last couple of years we're never going to sort of position them as a contender. But do you want to answer?
I mean, look, people are, to us, people are the greatest asset class, and we invest in great people. Josh is one of the best people in the world, and in entrepreneurship, we all have our failures. Sean's failed, I failed. If you don't fail, you don't have a seat at the table. You haven't tried hard enough. You have to fail as fast as possible to get to success ultimately, and never look back. So the best people, the most successful people I've met have something what I call success amnesia. And success amnesia is, you did Facebook, I did this. Okay, we look backwards and gloat about anything. You did it, great. Keep going. Just move forward. Keep building. Build value for people. Don't extract value from people. And the other part of it is, but there's success amnesia. There's also failure amnesia. Don't let it get you down. And we've gone through tough times in our lives, and we've shared those stories, and we've never ever given up hope. And entrepreneurship at its core is about going after your dreams and never ever giving up hope that you can accomplish them. And that's the inspiring part of entrepreneurship that drives us to create the things that we create. And Josh tried, and he's a beautiful soul, and I'm extremely happy. We're both extremely happy for him. Facebook's going to get a lot of value out of his talent.
Look, I mean, as a large Facebook shareholder, it obviously benefits me when a great team of people goes over to Facebook that I can trust, and I know that they're solving a problem at Facebook that Facebook was having a hard time solving on their own. So it all kind of works out. But to your point about having success amnesia, I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the world. There aren't that many serial entrepreneurs who have systematically started many companies. And I think some of that is just that well, first of all, if you do very well and you make a lot of money, when you look back on your experiences and running a company or starting a company, and there's almost a kind of disbelief in did I really go through that? Did I really deal with all of that pain and headache and hassle and intensity? And this is one of the reasons why people who are founders are often so bonded together, like people who've gone to war. They'll never forget those experiences. But to get up and do that again, over and over again, knowing full well each time exactly what's in store for you, I think that is more rare, and it definitely requires that you're not willing to rest on your laurels. I can't sit back and say, okay, well, I founded a bunch of companies. They've been tremendously successful. Therefore, all my companies are going to be successful. I have to be as paranoid and as edgy about each new company and approach it Obviously, I get the benefit of experience and relationships and network, and certain things become easier over time. Things that were really hard for me when I was 22, like raising money, become very easy for me. Now 10 years later at 32. So, anything to say?
I think there is something spiritual about entrepreneurship, and this is the brotherhood and the kind of soldiers in arms part that you talk about, the bonds that entrepreneurs can create together. The reason why thousands of people are here and what Loïc and Geraldine have created here is beautiful for Europe and for the world is that we can come together, we can share our stories together. On the private side, we do share these stories and we do bond. People who have started companies, you have to be able to look death in the face multiple times and realize that, and this is something I realized when I was in Libya 2 months ago, is that once you lose the capacity to be afraid of that which held you from going after your dreams, then fear becomes finite. Fear becomes finite, hope becomes infinite. And that's what I think is changing the world, is that people who used to be afraid have lost their fear. And they're looking at the world in a completely new way. Serial entrepreneurs, that are like in the way that Sean is talking about, we are not afraid of death. We welcome it because it challenges us to think anew about our lives, to go after problems that might kill us. Who cares? If you believe in your idea, you fall in love with it, you're obsessed.
You're obsessed with music for you, Sean? Is music one of these things where you failed and you get back up with Spotify?
Totally. I mean, there's a reason that Napster never expanded into other forms of file sharing. We obviously would have had a better case on our hands if we had been anything other than just a music sharing service. But we stuck to our guns mostly because Sean Fanning and I were huge music fans and remain huge music fans. Spotify was my opportunity for redemption. It was the chance that my only chance really to play some role in fixing a lot of the problems that I played a part in creating. And
Exactly.
it was. It's come full circle in a lot of ways, and this is gets back to the point I made about how certain things get easier as you get older and you're more experienced, and build a better network. Just getting a meeting with the record labels at Napster, they didn't want to talk to us. They weren't interested in settlements. They wanted to sue us and decisively shut us down. I didn't speak their language. I didn't have any credibility in those circles. Now a lot of the guys running the record labels I would consider good friends of mine, and I do deals outside of Spotify and outside of technology with their industry, and understand the way that industry works. And it's in particular with the media businesses, they tend to be very insular and very protected, and they tend to be run by a small elite. And they're for a 19-year-old kid out of suburban Virginia, it's extremely hard to penetrate those industries, whether it's Hollywood or the music business. So. I probably was never in a position to it was a pipe dream, it was a fantasy to imagine getting the deals that we have today at Spotify back in 1999 at Napster. I had in mind a business model that looked almost identical. Sean Fanning and I both essentially agreed on what the model should look like, the ultimate model. And but it wasn't until 2010 that we were able to get the record labels to pay attention to that model.
What do you think the biggest problem is currently in the music industry, and what's your hope that Spotify can solve it?
What's the first
The biggest problem with music today? The biggest problem that you cause?
Excuse me. I have there's a subjective answer to that question, and there's the obvious objective answer. So the objective answer is that the music industry, or the record business in particular, because the music industry covers everything from publishing to touring to merchandising, but the business of making music and selling, the term of trade, record, whatever it is, CDs, downloads, subscriptions, that business has collapsed over the last 10 years. Went from a $45 billion worldwide industry to now a $12 billion worldwide industry. That's complete collapse. And so, obviously that's the biggest problem. It's very hard to make money as a record label today. They're losing, this overall size of the industry is much, much smaller. They have to continue downsizing internally in order to generate earnings. And it's harder and harder as an artist, as a result, to make money selling your music. You've got to figure out other ways to make money. So that's the, big problem. The subjective problem is that when you have a broken, I should say, it's my view that the best music in the world is not getting made today. The best music in history is not getting made today. And that's a completely subjective view. You may think other people in the audience may, vociferously disagree with me and think, no, actually, this is like the greatest era of music ever. But I think there's something wrong, because there's something wrong with the distribution system. The mechanism by which music gets to your ears, via a record label, via, whatever music consumption service you're using, whether it's a streaming service or download service or piracy. The distribution system, that same system that doesn't produce money to keep the industry healthy, is really unable to take risks on all the great artists that come in. They have to stick to what's familiar to them. They have to stick to funding like, disposable pop music that they understand. They have to let bands get much, much farther along in their career before they finally sign them, because they're not willing to take risk. And as a result, all of these amazing artists that are probably out there, they're not even thinking that there's a future for them in making music. The Bob Dylans of our era, the Led Zeppelins of our era, I'm not sure those people are musicians right now. At least professional musicians.
They're probably coders.
Maybe they're programmers. Maybe they're working at Best Buy, hanging out or Guitar Center or something. But I have a suspicion that if the industry were much healthier, we would be seeing a lot more great music. And that again, that's a very subjective opinion, but it motivates me internally to want to do something to fix the industry of music, so that the great art that isn't getting made or isn't getting heard, it may be getting made and just not heard, can actually start to find an audience.
How do you think Spotify specifically solves the problem?
How does Spotify fix the problem? Well, part of what's wrong with distribution, kind of broadly speaking, is music distribution. Is getting how do you get music heard today? How do you build an audience at all? Radio's kind of dying. Radio is, for most people, terrestrial radio is dead. And to the extent that radio exists at all, it's only in service of, top 40 pop songs and, kind of going after either very young or old demographic. So you need a great music discovery system. Where do I've believed for 10 years that in order for music to go viral, you needed to have a free tier of service. And that's ultimately what we've been able to achieve with Spotify and the integration with Facebook. We have a free tier of service so that anybody can experience any song for free. I can see your entire music collection. I can listen to anything. I can subscribe to your playlist. If I don't have this free tier of experience, I'm basically stuck with an iTunes experience where even if I make it social by bringing your Facebook friends into it, I can't explore your music without first buying that music. So, iTunes doesn't. This is the reason why you see, Ping isn't working particularly well for Apple, because their licensing model just doesn't support social discovery of music. Social discovery is about basically frictionless distribution. I need to be able to click on your profile. I need to be able to click on a song in your profile, Fleet Foxes, and immediately play it and listen to it, and then decide if I want to add it to my collection or not. We've finally gotten to a place where that's possible, and I think that's begun to address this question of where do we find our music? How do we find out about new music? How does music spread socially through a social network or a group of friends?
So we're going to go into, thank you. We're going to go into audience Q&A. So raise your hand if you have questions. There's Kathy Brooks. Where are the microphone holders? There you go.
I can probably be heard anyway. Hello, there we go. Hey guys. I would love each of you to talk about your greatest failure and what you learned from it.
All right.
Sure. Well, this assumes that there's one greatest failure. I experience failure with enough regularity that it's actually kind of hard for me to think of the biggest one. I don't. It's never one really specific thing that you can point to. I mean, certainly there's we failed with Napster to build a legal licensing model, and as a result, we watched the industry that we loved collapse over these succeeding 10 years. The biggest failure we made there, I think, was just hiring. So we hired the wrong people. We built the wrong team. We hired people who, my radar for the kind of parasitic and startups, when you have a company or band or anything that's going really well, that has a lot of hype around it, it inevitably attracts a certain breed of kind of parasitic leech that you have to be if you do make the mistake of hiring it, you have to realize your mistake quickly and systematically eradicate it like you would any kind of insect. Basically, this was a huge issue for us at Napster. We hired all the wrong people. We hired the people who were really were not competent executives, but I was too young and naive to distinguish between a competent, seasoned executive and someone who just had a whole bunch more experience than I did and was able to communicate in a polished way and impressed me. And Sean Fan and I were both easily impressed at that moment in time, and as a result, we hired a lot of really crazy people. Sure.
One of the things we believe in is radical transparency. So I'll just keep it real. My greatest failure was a personal failure. As I started my first company and got married young and got the first marriage failed. And in the middle of starting a company, and I had two little kids. So I had my little daughter and a baby Bjorn, and I had full custody of the kids, and I had to start a new company, and writing the business plan with the baby Bjorn and the baby bottle, and that was a failure that then made me much stronger as a person, as an entrepreneur, so that things didn't stress me out as much. And was able to look at challenges and not lose control. I always kind of see that as a period in time, both personally and professionally, where I learned how to be self-sufficient and rise up in the face of something that was quite challenging. That company was a really big vision. It was called Web Operating System, WebOS, and I was coming straight out of Berkeley. And the lesson I learned was, don't build products for 10 years ahead of its time, and began to learn to calibrate the ideas closer to maybe 2 years or 3 years ahead of its time, and work with the greatest people you can to launch the product at a time that the market and people really, really need that.
That 10 years ahead of its time thing is something that you both sort of share.
Yeah.
Another question? Hi.
Hello. Hi, my name is Chris Parker. I know you're not going to believe this, but I'm actually your son from 27 years from now.
Whoa.
You told me to come back to the web today and talk to
This
you.
got way more intense.
You told me to come back to the web today and talk to you about the next big venture and to ask you to go for drinks with me after. So I'm just wondering if you're going to accept. I'm not kidding, by the way.
It looks like it.
That was a great question.
Best question I've ever heard.
Thank you.
I'm going to use that on
Dad?
somebody else at some point.
Who's your mom?
Oh, she's a Russian woman. You told me not to talk about that.
Wait, my wife is Russian?
Well,
I think it's your wife.
Is she your model?
yeah, she's a model.
Sweet.
So, would you like to go for drinks with me after? Dad?
I gotta go. I gotta go meet this girl.
It's Russian girl.
So, Dad?
Well, maybe. It's possible.
Okay.
I gotta get back to my.
Okay, thanks, son.
He's genetically is persistent, so that's.
That's good.
Genetically persistent.
That's awesome. I better not have a kid in the audience.
Ayala Blantuo here. I have a question for Sean. Sean, I see you as a visionary, as someone who is able to see what's coming up in the future and what's really going to get people going. And I would like to hear your vision of where you see the social web going.
So,
She's not Russian.
I can't say I've never been asked that question before. I always struggle between like should I be consistent? My PR people would tell me to be consistent and stay on message, or should I try to come up with something completely unique that maybe I'll go off message and just say something that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We can try to spawn an entire cottage industry of companies doing some really strange thing that doesn't make
I feel like
any
Sounders
sense.
Fund gets trained to just say weird things. Like if you guys have meetings, you're like, what's the craziest thing you can tell press?
I just had a giant like 6 foot long novelty check made as part of the theatricality around the fundraising of my new startup. And I had the check made out from me to the company. So it was like, $15 million from Sean Parker to Airtime. And so we took this check to VC meetings. That's kind of a joke at the end, normally you get to let's get beers, like that kind of you're gonna hang out, talk, just stop talking work and just kind of hang out and talk. And at that point in the meeting, when I knew it was safe, I would have the giant novelty check brought in. I said, by the way, guys, if you don't invest, I will. And this, 6 foot long novelty check is going in the bank. And that was a weird story.
That's weird.
So where do you think the social web is going?
You're bringing it back around. Okay, the serious answer to that question is, I think I've said this before, so I feel like I'm repeating myself a bit, but I don't think politics has been figured out yet. I think in the 2008 cycle, there was a lot of talk about politics and social media, and I think a lot of that was a mythology that was promulgated by the campaigns in order to make themselves seem relevant and in order to make themselves seem like they had a special advantage over the other campaigns that weren't doing this. In truth, the social media elements of the Obama campaign, for instance, while they were extremely innovative, actually didn't produce much in the way of results. So Obama did raise hundreds of millions of dollars online, but it wasn't through social media. It was through old-fashioned mailing list, administration, dealing, basically old-fashioned politics taken online. I think this is the election cycle where we're finally going to start to see social media playing a significant role in determining the outcome of elections. And I think that certain people who embrace, certain candidates who embrace certain tools, and I'm leaving this somewhat open to interpretation, may find that they win out over a better funded candidate. Because at the end of the day, money is just a proxy for votes. And this is one of the things that makes politics so vulnerable to social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or some other tool set. Social media can deliver a relationship between people much more cost effectively than the old political methods, whether it's phone banking or district walking or all of these like very high touch television ads, these very expensive and very high touch field operation techniques that are conducted in the field, in the real world. So much of this can be done, this outreach can be done via social media. The tools to do it just haven't been built and widely deployed. And it's certainly, it is a myth that this happened in 2008. This is happening in the 2012 election cycle.
Just, if you remember, in 2008, Twitter was tiny. Facebook was much smaller. So the scale at which both those platforms have reached now is incredible. So this is going to be a very interesting election to watch. But also more interestingly, all of these tools are also affecting governments all over the world. Mr. Putin is in some trouble right now, and Mubarak and Gaddafi and any of these dictatorships are being affected by it. When I was in Tunisia, this is a good personal story, I was specifically asked by, and in Libya, I was specifically asked by these young freedom fighters to thank the creators of Facebook.
Thank you.
That was a beautiful moment. There's history being made, our world is being reborn, and we have a responsibility as entrepreneurs to help people get freedom, get rid of dictatorships, and hopefully make the 21st century something we can all be proud of.
One more question, make it a good one.
Hi.
Hello.
Nanuk Mia, Swedish television. I've been playing around with this Facebook Spotify relationship, and I wonder how you're so sure of that you want to get recommendations from your friends. Most of the people, or many of the connections I have on Facebook are like old classmates or distant relatives, and they're friends of my children, and they're not getting me the recommendations I want at all. So why are you so sure of that? And a follow-up question to that is, why do you have to have a Facebook account to be able to get a Spotify account?
So there are two good questions. I'll answer the second part of it. We really wanted to force the product to go social. So there's a lot of reasons why, there's a lot of reasons why it's very helpful to the health of the network and the usage of the. If you're just building a music service that's isolated, that's not a network product, that's not designed around sharing, then none of this matters. But if you're building one that is designed around sharing, you really want to have everyone sharing with each other. You always want to have the potential for everyone to share with each other. So requiring a Facebook login, allows achieves that purpose. Like every single user of the system has their entire Facebook friends imported into Spotify, and that enables a lot more sharing behavior, and it allows our partnership with Facebook to work better. We made a bet, and we'll see how this plays out. We could alter this position in the future, but we made a bet that Facebook is so deeply penetrated that it wouldn't. Sure, there's going to be a set of people who aren't Facebook users who really want Spotify. But we made the bet that there's enough people on Facebook at this point that it won't adversely affect our growth. And it has all these great benefits in terms of making sure the platform is used for sharing. Your first question, could you repeat your first question?
Well, how come, sorry, it's not working.
You remember?
Bad recommendations. Yeah, it's
Friends, recommendations from them. So I'm not sure everyone is going to want recommendations from their friends.
Depends on who your friends are.
Yeah, it depends on who your friends are, but I think that's part of the job of it's a product problem for us to solve over time, is figuring out which of your friends actually have recommendations that you might want. So we don't do any of this in the client today, and this is all functionality that's coming down the pipe at some point over the next several months. But for instance, if I'm listening to a track, it should tell me, Spotify should tell me, friends who are also listening to that track recently. Right? If I'm listening to a playlist, it should refer me to other playlists from my friends that are similar. So doing some of this simple algorithmic stuff to match you to listeners in your network who have similar tastes, I think is pretty powerful, and I think it goes, it may address your problem. It may also be the case that you're not the sort of person who really wants to discover the music socially. You're more of a lean-back listener, like a radio listener, like a Pandora listener, and you're going to discover your music passively. People have different consumption patterns, and the one thing that was quite clear when we launched Spotify in the US with Facebook integration was that up until that time, the consumption pattern of social discovery that problem had not been solved. So for the set of people who do want to discover music from their friends, they were not able to do it until we launched our service.
There's one thing on the social web question I want to touch on, which is quickly, is around the idea of collaborative consumption. Is that what the social web is enabling, plus mobile, is for the first time to solve a lot of inefficiencies in our world, especially around excess capacity. So people being able to, rent their own cars, or like in Paris now that Uber has launched, and we're lucky to invest in it yesterday. Uber is solving a big problem in excess capacity, bringing efficiency and magic to people's lives by leveraging the social web, by leveraging mobile to solve that. So I'm excited about that space. I think there's a lot of companies like TaskRabbit, like GetAround, like Uber, others. Uber's killing it, and I'm really glad they're here in Paris.
Malik, do you have a theory on the social web, or can I leave?
I was just
What are you guys talking about?
weekend plans.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but you guys are hanging out for a little bit, right? All right, cool.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Cool. Thank you very much, Sean. It was such a pleasure. Shirley, thank you so much for coming here. Thanks. Thank you, Alexia, thank you very much.